Okay, so this is the Unit 4 Keystone review packet. It's on cellular energy, which we talked about when we were learning about photosynthesis and cellular respiration, and basically how cells get the energy that they need to perform their cellular functions. So as a review, this is in book chapter 4, and it's only Study Island module 7. So the first question is, starting with the sun, describe the path that energy takes to reach ATP or to become ATP. So first of all, the sun, as we know, provides all of the energy for our planet, and that sun needs to be converted into a form that can be used by cells. Most of us aren't photosynthetic. Only plants and certain photosynthetic prokaryotes can get the energy directly from the sun. And they do that by taking carbon dioxide and water. Those are the reactants. They react together in the chloroplast to create glucose and oxygen. So remember, CO2, H2O, C6, H12, O6, and O2. Those are your formula, your molecular formulas, and then your names for those items are written right below it. Just as a reminder, the reactants react together to produce the products. So after the sun's energy goes into the light and dark reactions of photosynthesis in the chloroplasts, out is going to come glucose and oxygen. Glucose is a carbon-based, energy-rich molecule, and oxygen is oxygen. So we're going to then look at the next step of this, where you can see that the products of photosynthesis become the reactants of cellular respiration. So the products of photosynthesis kind of switch spots here. The glucose comes over and becomes a reactant. The oxygen comes over and becomes a reactant for cellular respiration. So glucose and oxygen is going to go into all living things. Remember back to our characteristics of living things. All living things respire. So it's not just animals who undergo cellular respiration. We also have plants. All the organisms have to respire to make ATP for their cells. So the glucose and the oxygen is going to go into the mighty mitochondria, and this mitochondria is going to convert that glucose into carbon dioxide, water, and ATP. So that's how the energy is converted from the sun to ATP, the form of energy that our cells need to do the work that they need to do, their active jobs. I'm going to zoom in here. Adenosine triphosphate is a high energy molecule with 3 phosphate molecules. That's why it's called triphosphate. The energy actually comes from the breaking of this bond here. That bond energy, when that third phosphate gets broken off, energy is released, and that energy is going to be used to do things that the cell needs to do, like active transport. Active transport we talked about in Unit 3 when we were talking about the cell needing energy for exocytosis and endocytosis and things like that. That energy comes from the ATP, which is formed during cellular respiration. So that's how the energy reaches the cellular level, reaches ATP from the sun. The next question in the Unit 4 packet is to describe the differences between anaerobic and aerobic respiration. So this is a simple deconstruction of the vocabulary term. Anaerobic, when you put the A in front of a word, it makes it its opposite, so it's anti-oxygen. The anaerobic processes that we talked about in Unit 4, the anaerobic processes that can make energy in the absence of oxygen, are fermentation and glycolysis. Fermentation is going to make alcohol as a byproduct. So when you think about fermentation, think about wine, things like that. So we take the grapes, which contain glucose, stick them in a wine bottle, put the cork in there. There's no oxygen, so fermentation is going to take place, and it's going to create energy, and the byproduct is going to be alcohol. So that's how these alcoholic beverages are created. So fermentation also occurs in smaller organisms like yeasts. They create alcohol and carbon dioxide bubbles. So when you look at a slice of bread and those little holes are in it, that's from carbon dioxide bubbles being produced during the process of fermentation. Glycolysis is a similar process. There's no oxygen involved, and glycolysis is going to produce energy in the absence of oxygen. And in people, the byproduct is lactic acid, and that's what makes your muscles sore and stuff like that. So fermentation's byproduct is alcohol, and then in people, this anaerobic respiration produces lactic acid. Okay, looking at page 26, this was one of the sample questions from the Keystone exam. It says a cell in the leaf of a green plant performs both photosynthesis and cellular respiration, often at the same time. Which statement best describes how these processes are related to each other? So again, we're looking at the question and saying how it best describes. So let's look through all of the choices. Both produce carbon dioxide. We know that photosynthesis does not produce carbon dioxide. If we look back at our photosynthesis equation, photosynthesis does not produce carbon dioxide. That's not on the product side. So that's not right. Both processes require energy directly from the sun. We know that cellular respiration does not get its energy directly from the sun. It uses the glucose that was made during photosynthesis. Products of one process are used as some of the reactants for the other process. Yeah, if we look back at our photosynthesis and cellular respiration equations, we see that the products of photosynthesis come over and become the reactants of cellular respiration. So I'm going to keep that as an option. And then thermal energy from one process is used as an energy source for the other process. I'm not really sure what it's asking there, so that makes me think it's not the best choice. So I'm going to go ahead and go with C. C is correct. Only 58% of people in the state of Pennsylvania got this question correct last year, which I think is on the low side. I think this was an easier question. If we look down at the key, we see that solar energy is used during photosynthesis. Glucose is used in cellular respiration, so we got all that. But what you really want to think about when you see a question like this on the Keystone exam is, like I've said before, using your scrap paper. So when I was thinking my way through this question, I wrote out photosynthesis and cellular respiration. I just kind of jotted it out on the paper. I always kind of draw a plant to help me remember what goes into photosynthesis, and I always kind of I usually draw a little person. This time I just drew a mitochondria, but I draw a little person and I think about that person taking glucose, taking in oxygen, blowing out carbon dioxide, water, and then having ATP as the byproduct. So I really use my scrap paper a lot when I'm thinking my way through these questions, and I want you to do the same thing. The next question was on page 27 of the review packet. This was also a short answer question on one of your Unit 4 exam, because I tried to, throughout the semester, pull questions from the Keystone sample packet and put them in your short answers so you could start to practice with that. But it says use the lists below to answer the questions. So I'm just going to look over cell structures observed in 2 organisms. So in organism 1, I see cell wall, and I know that cell walls are only found in plants. So I jot down plant. I'm looking through the list, and I see chloroplasts. I know that they're only found in plants, so I write that down too. I look over here and I see all these organelles, and I'm like, you know what? I wonder if that's an animal. So now I read the question. A student made a list of structures observed in cells from 2 different organisms. Which statement describes the most likely difference in the way organism 1 and organism 2 obtain energy? Well, that's pretty easy. Organism 1's definitely a plant, and so I know that they're photosynthetic. Okay. Let's look. A says only organism 1 uses solar energy to make energy-rich compounds. I feel like that's the right answer, but let's read the rest. Only organism 1 stores solar energy until it's needed for life processes. That's not going to actually store the sun's energy. It converts the sun's energy into glucose. So B is not right. Only organism 2 produces molecules for long-term energy storage. No, because we know that plants and animals go through cellular respiration. And then D says only organism 2 transforms food energy to ATP during cellular respiration. And again, just like letter C, we know that they both undergo cellular respiration. This is a big thing that people get tripped up on during the Keystone exam. They think animals do cellular respiration, plants do photosynthesis. And the truth is that they both do cellular respiration. Only plants undergo photosynthesis, but if you look in a plant cell, there's mitochondria in there, so they undergo cellular respiration as well. Don't get confused. So if we look down at the correct answer, we'll see that we were correct if we chose letter A. But what's depressing is only 46% of kids in Pennsylvania were correct. I expect 100% of you guys to be correct at things like this. And you can read through the explanation there yourself. So that's pretty much the review for Unit 4. Just as a reminder, use scrap paper when you take your Keystone exam. As you're reading through some of the multiple choice questions, you're going to get hints or clues that you might be able to use on a short answer question. As you're going through a short answer question, you might want to just jot some stuff down and then come back later and add more information. So if you use your scrap paper, that's really going to help you process through the answers in the Keystone. Good luck.